Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And today, Dr. Christine Silverstein is joining me, and we're going to talk about her book, Wrestling Through Adversity, Empowering Children, Teens, and Young Adults to Win in Life. And it's basically about mental health, because I think that's a topic that's not talked about as much. It's getting talked about more, but it still needs to be talked about even more in our society. So, Dr. Christine, welcome to the show. Tell us a little about yourself before we start talking about your book.
Yes, I am a peak performance coach. I've worked in my private practice in Ramsey, New Jersey, and now in Oakland, New Jersey for 30 years. I started off right from the get-go, going out onto the wrestling mat with the kids and to the gym for the gymnast, and also hands-on. I'm a registered nurse, and I've been so since I was 19 years old. And so I have a lot of experience with health and wellness, and also I'm a medical surgical nurse, so I work a lot with my clients to help them overcome injuries, especially with athletes. And I'm also a hypnotherapist, and I've worked with teaching self-hypnosis as well for 30 years. And it's been very useful, especially with young people, children, teens, and young adults, because they have great imaginations and they really love to use their mind power. So that's been a great experience for me. I'm very grateful for the clients I've worked with and I've learned from. And so I could write my book and tell the world that we can all use the power of our minds and succeed in life.
So what is a peak performance coach? You said that's the very first thing you started off with. I'm a peak performance coach, because I know a lot of people are probably asking, what exactly is that? Isn't that another one of those woohoo coaches, like life coaches, you know? Or what
No, well, I was really one of the original ones to decide I was going to do this, because I focused on working with sports. So my area of expertise is performing arts as well, athletics, academics, business, and also, of course, health. So I needed to relate to the sports world where you reach your peak, you know, for the championship, and that those words are used. So that was the motto for my office, reach your peak. And I decided to focus on performance because I believe performance is in every area of our lives, even when you go to the operating room or you're recovering from surgery. So you want to be at your peak when you go into surgery and also heal, but you also might want to win that wrestling championship and be at your peak and not all exhausted at the end of the season when everybody else wants to be champion and you're exhausted.
And yeah, we can actually apply that to life too, because at the beginning of the day, like the beginning of the week, oh, it's a fresh new week. And by the end of the week, you're like, man, when is the weekend coming?
Yes, exactly.
So how did you get into this? Because you started off, like you said, you were a nurse at 19 years old. How did you get into deciding that you wanted to coach the people to get through their performance, their mental health, to break their mental blocks?
Well, I had 4 children, and when they were getting older, the teenage years, they were having some challenges, you know, in school, in social situations. And also they were athletes. So they had, one was a wrestler, one was a gymnast, pianist. So they had challenges with their performances. And also they were getting into this mindset that I'm not that smart and things like that. So I knew that they needed assistance, but not to bring them to a psychologist or to a psychiatrist for help. I wanted to find somebody who could help them themselves, right? To teach them what to do, and therefore they'll know what to do in any given situation. So when my 2 oldest children became teenagers, they were having some actual challenges. Part of it was with the growth and development, the physical growth. For instance, my daughter was a gymnast, and within a short period of time, when she turned 12, she grew quite a bit. And also her foot turned from a size 6 to a size 8 within a short period of time. And now naturally it's very hard to make your turns, and on the bars she was dragging her feet because she wasn't used to the length of her body. And so she was very upset about that when she came home from one competition. And my son had challenges too, because at one point he had asthma on the wrestling mat. He had eaten something he was allergic to during practice. He had to go to the state championship with a nebulizer that he had never used before and this big machine to aerate his lungs, in between. And so he was upset about that. And people thought he was going to win the championship and even bet on him. And he didn't do as well as he wanted, but he made up the difference the next year when I taught him these techniques, but also he went to a new school with a new focus, and he was able to succeed and even get a scholarship to college. So, but right then I knew they needed assistance, but I didn't know exactly how I was going to help them, but I was determined to do something. And I brought one of my children to a psychologist just to check it out, what the psychologists have to offer my child. And by the time he came out of his office, the psychologist told me I needed to go to see him. There was something wrong with me. My husband should tag along too. So I knew then that this is not the right place, and I really want somebody to help them. And I began to realize that I had strengths as a child. When I was 10 years old, I won a skating championship when my dad, who was the director of the Police Athletic League, told me there were no sports for girls. And I came home with roller skates, and I won the Queen's Championship, in New York City, and I coached myself. So that was when I was 10. So I had this belief in myself, I think at an early age, that I can do what I need to do for my family. And then I also had this experience, which was really horrific for me, in that I had 4 miscarriages when I was in my 20s. I wanted to have a family, and it was very devastating. You get to feel like you'll never be able to accomplish it. And the doctors began to call me an habitual aborter, meaning that I kept on having miscarriages. And I was desperate this one time, very saddened. And, I saw my friends having babies, and I was just very sad. So my mom told me about this doctor out on Long Island, which was quite a distance from where I lived in New Jersey. But it was her neighbor's son. And, I should go see him. He's a specialist, for people like me. So I drove all the way out there by myself, no GPS, right? I found it out, right? And so he examined me, and he's telling me, you need to have all this testing. You need to have x-rays. And I'm thinking, what for? I'm able to get pregnant. I just having challenges keeping the pregnancy. So by the end of the exam, he told me that my only hope was to take this prescription for a drug called DES, diacylestilbestrol, and that I knew to be toxic to women and to the offspring. They were just finding that out after it had been used for many years. I even said to him, "Doctor, that's toxic." And he said, "Well, that's the only thing we have for people like you." So I took this prescription and drove all the way home crying. My husband was waiting there for me. But I decided right there and then, I'm going to help myself. If this is the only way I can have a baby, like the doctor says, well, then I'll just adopt, because I'm not taking this drug. And the other thing was, I decided to have what I called an expectant mind. And I came up with this myself. In other words, I saw my friends pregnant. Well, if they can do it, I can do it too, right? So at any rate, I started to study meditation, transcendental meditation, that I practiced every day. And that helped me close to become pregnant again. But during the first few months, when I usually had these miscarriages, it was late at night and I couldn't sleep, and I was crying, thinking I could have a miscarriage in the bed again. And so I looked up in the telephone book, the yellow pages, where I could go see a hypnotist, a psychologist who used hypnosis. And I don't know where I got that idea from, but in the middle of the night. And so I went to the doctor and I studied hypnotism to help myself. And I got through the pregnancy and I had a beautiful son 9 months later. So that worked out. And I always remembered that in the back of my mind. And over the years, as I had another miscarriage later, after the births of my children, I had 4 children by the end of it all. And I really believed in these processes that I went through. And I figured I could use the same mental conditioning for my children. I could teach them what I knew. And also I studied hypnosis. I've been studying hypnosis for more than 30 years. So I'm pretty well versed in how to work with people of all ages, but I specialize in children, teens, and young adults these days. So I studied this, and then one day I was coming home from gymnastics, dropping my daughters off, and I passed by this furniture truck. It was from North Carolina. It was a big 18-wheeler, and it was in the parking lot of a vacant gas station. And I saw they had all this furniture outside the door, and there was a recliner. And I thought, wouldn't that recliner be nice for my hypnosis office, right? So I bought it right there, stuffed it in the back of my station wagon. I drove it home. I dragged it into my house in the corner of the ground floor family room, and I put my diplomas over it. And when my daughters came home, they said, "Mom, what's that?" I said, "This is my new hypnosis office." So I set up shop right there, and that's how it started. From there, of course, I branched off to the team members of the gym, the wrestling coaches, and also to the neighbors and people who were aware I was helping children, teens, and young adults in the high school nearby. So I helped people with all sports and over the years, and even Olympic sports. But I started out just really focusing on my children. What can I do? How can I set it up for them? And when they first started to succeed, then people noticed, and then they asked me to help their children. So that's how it all began. And it worked out beautifully because they all went to college. They're all very smart, and they were able to be athletes. My daughter was a pianist, and she learned what to do when she had her recitals. So that worked out for them. But also beyond that, it worked out to adults. One of my first clients was a man who had metastatic prostate cancer, and I helped him to live longer by the knowledge I had as a nurse, by using the power of the mind.
Wow. I mean, that's just, there's so much to unpack right there. First of all, I want to go back and talk about when you took your child to the therapist and they said you and your husband need to come in because there's something wrong with you. That reaction, that would have really made me so mad that I probably would have not even been able to think straight. What made you able to get through what you got through and said, okay, nope, we're not doing this my way?
Well, I thought it was strange. I thought, it's like, why is he telling me that? My husband wasn't even there, and he told me I should bring him in the next time, So we just scratched our heads and said, there must be a better way. And I said, I know a way. At least I'll start with this, because I couldn't bear to watch my daughter on the bars and crying afterwards like she had been doing, or my son being disappointed because he wasn't able to perform the way he had practiced. And I knew that this would be helpful. As I said, I trained myself to win 3 roller skating champions when I was 10. And just by my own wits and actually by using the same kind of techniques I use today, I just didn't know what they were called. Like, I imagined myself going over the finish line first, like that. And I did, and imagined my new shiny roller skates that I won. And that was my first pair of skates that weren't hand-me-downs. I had 3 older sisters who always gave me their clothing and their skates and things and bikes. So that was my very first pair of new roller skates. I was so proud of them.
So I've got a parallel right here because I'm the youngest of 4. I have 3 older sisters as well. And you mentioned the police league. Was your dad a policeman or not?
No, he worked for what's called the Police Athletic League, PAL. It's called PAL. And he wasn't a police officer, but he was hired by the police department, and his center was sponsored by the police department. Also, all the sports, baseball, football, and basketball were all sponsored. And it was very inexpensive. I remember getting my PAL pin in the beginning of the school year. It cost 25 cents. So it was free.
Wow.
As well, games and things like that. So a lot of the kids joined, and it was for everybody, races, all religions. They had, Catholic teams and baseball teams and things like that. And everybody got along and learned what to do. So my father was my inspiration from a very early age. And I do refer to him quite a bit in my book.
We need to take a brief commercial break, but we will be right back after that.
The threats women face today are unparalleled and even more dangerous than ever before. 1 in 3 women globally has been the victim of an assault. Women are terrified and they are looking for answers.
In the book, Street Smart Safety for Women, we draw on our experiences, both personal and professional, to provide those answers. It's by women, for women. Street Smart Safety for Women is available wherever books are sold.
In a world full of chaos, she chose to anchor her story in hope. Through storms and silence, she found strength. And now, she's inviting you to do the same. This isn't just a book, it's a lifeline. For every woman who's ever felt unseen, your healing begins here. Anchored in hope. Available now.
And we are back talking with Dr. Christine, who's the author of Wrestling Through Adversity, Empowering Children, Teens, and Young Adults to Win in Life. And I'm sure even if you're not a teen or a young adult or a child, you probably could still get something out of your book. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you read part of your book. And so the floor is all yours.
Okay. I'm going to start when I was very young and just learning who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. So here's an excerpt. After I turned 16, I went on an interview at a nursing school in Brooklyn, New York. I was a Queens girl from Far Rockaway and had never ridden on the New York subway system on my own. I got lost in the huge East New York train station before I found the Canarsie line to Bushwick Avenue near Williamsburg and Bedford-Stuyvesant. It had snowed the day prior, but warmed up, making slushy conditions. While standing on the street corner near the school, a truck passed by and splashed me from head to toe with stained snow and freezing ice water. My white fur faux hat was covered in tainted slush, as well as my face and my coat. When I arrived at the school's restroom, I quickly washed off my hat as best I could and combed the faux fur with my fingernails. Then I cleaned up my legs in the sink and wiped off the black rings on my snagged hosiery, created by the friction of my snow boots. I placed my hat back on my head, put on white gloves and also high heels, and fluffed up my pink woolen dress. I looked like a scared, drowned rat when I was called into the office of the director, who was a nurse and a nun dressed in a white habit. The chair I sat in across from the director's desk seemed too enormous for my small frame. I felt intimidated when she asked me why I wanted to be a nurse. I recalled my friend who had epilepsy and recounted his story of how he had a seizure and how I wanted to help him. I was managing well enough until the director looked down at my application and saw my age. She told me that she noticed I had just passed my 16th birthday and said I had to be 18, enter the school in the fall. She asked me why I was so young graduating from high school. I reflected a moment and replied, I don't know, I guess I'm really smart. The answer in the fact that I scored high on science and on an aptitude test for nursing helped me gain entrance, where I learned on the first day of class that nursing care is holistic.
Wow, 16 years old. Wow. I mean, that's you can tell they were impressed with you, but then they looked, they're like, wait a second.
Exactly. And I thought, well, why can't I come to this school? Of course, whatever age I am, I thought it was kind of a strange question, but I just thought for a moment, and that just came out of my mouth. And I think there might have been like a little angel on my shoulder to help me that day, right? But I really wanted to be a nurse, and my mom had a really serious appendicitis, infected appendix when she was 15, and she always wanted to be a nurse, but she had 5 children and she never got to school. So she encouraged me, plus my friend who had the seizure in the middle of the street, and I didn't know what to do to help them. So that was really my strong desire. I had to do this, and I just felt empowered. So that was the feeling inside me, the same same knowing I had when I was 10 and I was going to be the champion of the skating race.
And like you said earlier, your dad is your big inspiration. Do you think you get your resilience and that can-do attitude from your parents, or was it just your dad?
I get it from my parents, my mother as well, because my mother encouraged me to go to school and to stay in school. And she worked as a waitress so that she could pay for my tuition. So no, she was a strong person in my life that helped me through all kinds of issues and challenges. But particularly, both my parents were very proud when I graduated at 19 from school.
Well, I can't even imagine. First of all, you're graduating high school at 16, so that's a huge leap. And then you're going into a serious, I want to say serious because anything medical is serious, field in nursing as a 16-year-old. And how many looks and stares did you get from people when you walk in the room and they're like, "You're too young to be a nurse. Are you a
Yes.
handicapped? Are you this?"
Yes, as a matter of fact, my very first patient on the medical surgical unit was a man who had what did he have? He had a heart attack the night before, and they didn't have, in those days, they didn't have ICU. So he's right there on the hospital floor. So I was assigned to him, and when I went in to talk to him and said, "I'm going to be giving you your bath this morning, your morning bath, and take care of you." And I was really nervous because he was my first patient. And he looked at me and he said, "You look like you're 12. I said, "Oh no, I'm 16." And I thought he was going to have another heart attack.
I can't even imagine going through that. I mean, my older two girls are 30 and 27, and if you look at the opening credits, they're the two smaller ones out of the three that I have. And I can imagine them getting that. "Well, you're how old?" Because my 30-year-old doesn't look 30. So I can imagine. And the scared. I mean, how did you get over being scared? Of course, that has to do with your mental toughness, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yes, well, I believe that you're put in situations that you have to work through, wrestle through, and that's how you get to be resilient. So that's all part of it, although sometimes people or parents will shy away from it and say, "That's too hard, let me shield you from it." But you really need to experience adversity to become resilient.
That brings the great point that you just brought up, that parents try to shield their kids. And we need to let the kids go out and experience the world, because they're not going to learn unless they experience it. Because then a time comes up that maybe they're off at college or something and mom and dad aren't there.
Exactly.
How are they going to handle life?
And that is true today with college students. We have the second highest cause of death in college is suicide. So we need to be mindful of that when our children are young and teach them what they need to know to help them to grow.
So let's talk about the hypnotist of it all and your mind power, because that's obviously what drives you throughout is your mindset. I mean, you can have a wonderful mindset, but how do you pass that mindset on to somebody else?
Well, the way I do it is, well, I'm also a teacher in the sense that I have a doctorate in education. So all my programs are educational. And the first thing I have to do, especially when I work with children and teenagers, I've worked with a lot of teenagers, I have to build trust, right? So you can't just say what you know and say, do this and do that. You have to have them trust you, and I have to trust them as well. So we work together. And I tell them, I bring them in situations like a wrestler. I might say, "Listen, here, you're going to be in this wrestling match, and I have this scarecrow in my office. It's from Halloween, but I use it as a prop. So we pretend this wrestler's going out onto the wrestling match, onto the wrestling mat, and he is scared, and he's looking at his opponent, who is very muscular, taller. Last year, he was the state champion, right? So before he even imagines walking onto the mat, this person might be really petrified, right, by the scarecrow, the big wrestler with the muscles. So I explain that you might have some skills as well. Did you ever think of that? And you better value them. I have a toolbox nearby, so I say, let's pretend to put all your tools on there on this silver platter, and then we're going to talk about how you need to value your skills no matter what. You're not giving away points for peanuts to your opponent. So I use imagery like that, and I get them to align with me and to realize they need to, if you lose, if you don't do as well as you want to on an exam, you have to still believe in yourself and believe in your skills, especially when you're an athlete and you started when you were 5 years old and now you're 16. You have a lot of skills that you can use. And just because it didn't work once doesn't mean that you can't build it up and put it on a feedback loop, which is part of my program. So I teach them how to do that. I teach them how to get in the zone through self-hypnosis, which is self-directed, self-guided. And when you do that, it's just a matter of doing your breathing. I teach breathing easy, which is part of my mindful toughness skill sets. And also mental rehearsal, which is very important to build confidence. I use that for everything, whether you're going into the operating room, whether you're imagining yourself going onto the wrestling mat, or you imagine yourself going up to space as an astronaut. You need to imagine it in the way the brain works, and we're finding that out more and more with neuroscience. It's as if you're actually there when you're imagining it. So that's the beautiful thing of it, and that's why it works so well. So skill sets like that. And then they go out and they try it out. So one wrestler I worked with last year, his parents were upset about his fact that he had a car accident right after he got his license, and he went to the prom and he had a little bit to drink and he was vaping. So his parents brought him to my office, and he was 17, and the mother was saying, "Oh, look at all the things you're doing, and you should be focused on school." And the father was upset because he wanted him to wrestle better, and he had lost this big match a couple of weeks earlier. So here's the young person looking down. He looks like a man. He's 17, but he shaves, right? And the parents are treating him like he's already an adult. And then and another time they're treating him as if he's just a young child, and they're talking down to him, right? So I helped him. I brought him into my office, and we did the breathing easy, and we had a session. I recorded it, and he was able to go to wrestle with his team just a week later and win all his matches and feel so much better about himself, because I showed him what to do. And that is to imagine yourself there on the mat performing, and then to be able to recall all the times you did win a match and use that. That's called mental recall. And also positive self-talk is hugely important. So this one wrestler just sitting there, I could see how he was demoralized when his parents were yelling. But once I mentioned the mental rehearsal for his wrestling moves and the plans of action that he could develop before his next match, the father, who had been a wrestler, was so happy. He was helping him, So it worked out. And then in the summer, he was able to win a whole tournament, and he got a summer job as a salesperson because he was so confident.
Wow. That's I can't even imagine, first of all, yes, you are bringing a great service to these kids, because a lot of times with social media and everything else, your self-esteem is like rock bottom. And you're, like you said earlier about the suicide rates in college students. What can we do to start kids out early enough so that they're not having those mental blocks? For what age do we start pumping our kids up to think that they can achieve? Because obviously you had that from day one with your parents, so that other parents can pump their kids up. And what ways can other parents do that too? Because I think that's important as well.
Yes, it's very important. And that's like what you said before, my book is more than just for children, teens, and young adults. It's for adults, like parents and grandparents and guardians, coaches, because we have to look at ourselves as adults. And it was very interesting. I had this opportunity in January to go to the Golden Glove book signing for my book, and I met a lot of the movie stars there, and they were so gracious to receive my book. They asked me about it, and this year a lot of the awards were focused on kids and teenagers. So one couple, they were so enthusiastic. They were fairly young, and one was an editor and one was an actor. So they said, "What can we do? We have an infant, a 9-month-old, and we have a 7-year-old, and we want to do what we can do, but we don't know." So I said, the father said, "I have to read this book for sure." But it was very interesting because I started talking about what's called mirror neurons. Now, we just discovered this pretty much in the 21st century, but our children have mirror neurons, and that helps them to follow everything the parents do, everything they say, everything they know, their accents, everything, when they speak. So the parents at that point, they just looked at each other and said, oh no, I guess we better do something right away. The way we talk to our children, I told them, start right now. The way you speak, the way you help them envision, the way you support them, the way you put them in your children's shoes. And all of that is important. So that's why you need to learn about yourself. And a lot of fathers I've witnessed over the years, matter of fact, one that brought his son to my office, father of a wrestler, on Christmas Eve, he wanted his son to do well at the tournament, but that's not the only thing. He tried to burst into the session with his 13-year-old son, and he told me that he wanted me to teach his son how to kill. So that was, I was thinking then, what am I doing here? But I got up and I closed the door on his foot and I locked the door, and I taught his son what to do here. This is how you can get through your next match. And I said, is this what happens with your dad? And he said, yes, especially when I lose. But I was able to work with his mom, who brought him the next time. And I told her, you have to speak to your husband. This is not going to facilitate winning for sure. And she did. And I don't know what she said, but over the course of time, he did better after 4 or 5 sessions. Then I got a call from his coach, his private coach, who said, that so-and-so is doing really well. And thank you for helping, the student. He said, but what I really want to know is, what did you do to turn the father around 180 degrees? Because he's so nice all of a sudden. And so somehow it reached the father. And then this coach, he was studying acting in Manhattan, and he had trouble with his auditions. So I helped him through his wrestling, because he was a wrestler in college, and how to focus and win to go on the stage and to get some auditions so he could be on Broadway. So that was a win-win situation all around. But at first I thought, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? He said, he has to be more aggressive. Teach him to kill. It's like, oh my goodness.
I can't even imagine, a lot of times the attitudes of the parents do. The children, if they feel like they have to perform, and that the only way they're going to get accolades from their parents or praise from their parents is performing at such a high rate, that anxiety level has got to be through the roof for the kids.
Yes, that's true with academics and other areas of your life as well. So it's very important for the parents to put themselves in their children's shoes, and also to teach them the skills and to work through their own traumas, what happened to them when they were younger. And once you work through your own, then you're able to help your children to work through theirs, and not project what you experienced onto them, that they have to win because you didn't make it on the basketball team when you were in high school or something, right? So it's very important to look at ourselves, and that's how we can help ourselves. And also, by the way, once you learn the techniques I was just talking about and the feedback loop analysis, they're free as the air you breathe. So if you're talking about you don't have health care, you don't have, insurance, or you think that it's a lengthy process that you have to go through psychoanalysis or something, you can easily learn what to do step by step, and you feel better about yourself as well when you help your children to succeed.
So is that what you consider mindful toughness then?
Yes. Mindful toughness in itself is a mindset, right? Like you mentioned before, it's a way of knowing. It's the kind of mindful toughness I had when I went to Brooklyn to that nursing school, right? There's something about me that I know I'm confident. I guess I'm smart, I said, and I was smart, but that really turned her around because she wasn't thinking about letting me in, and I was the youngest student in my class. So that's the mindful toughness, but the mindful toughness skill sets are the breathing easy, the mental rehearsal, mental recall, positive self-talk, and feedback loop analysis, which is so important for everybody, because you need to start looking at your mistakes as opportunities to learn what to do and what not to do, and not to repeat your own mistakes over and over again. which can really sabotage your efforts to win.
That last little bit, nail on the head, because a lot of people, when they fail, they give up. They don't go on. I mean, you look at the divorce rate right now in this country.
Exactly. I was going to say that. You look at the divorce rate. Like, I always wondered when I was younger why Elizabeth Taylor got married so many times,
I mean, we have to learn that, failure is not failure. Failure is just a way for you to learn a skill,
Yes.
You think, like, for instance, Michael Jordan. I'm from North Carolina, so Michael Jordan stands out in my head. He was cut from his high school basketball team, and now he's probably one of the greatest NBA players of all time.
That's right. That's right. Yes, I call it Edisonian thinking, because I learned about Thomas Edison when I was a young girl. I saw a movie when he played the son of his mother trying to help him through surgery. So he invented this light. And that was the movie at the time. I don't know if it was true, but I always respected Thomas Edison. And I know he had a lot of trouble, and sure these days if they diagnosed him. But at any rate, I went to his home lab when my children were young, and the tour guide said that he would try to invent that light bulb, and he was showing us like how many, maybe thousands of times, to find the right filament that went in the light bulb. And somebody would ask him, so why are you wasting your time with that? Look at all these mistakes you're making. He said, what mistakes? I'm looking at what works and what doesn't. And he had competition at the time to be the first one, but he persisted, sat up in his lab all night long, and he got in the zone. He had these little balls he held on to, and we can build up our power, use our minds fully if you know how to do it. And it's best to start when you're younger and have your parents' guidance, your teacher's guidance, and then also to put things on the feedback loop. Say you get bullied at school and you don't know what to do, and you go home crying, and then you talk to your parents and they give you a little strategy. Well, the next day you go back and then you do something new, and you come home and you put that on the feedback loop to see how you can improve. So it's a very easy process and very natural. And we all should learn it, because we really get sabotaged if we fail a test and we don't know what to do. And what our parents say is so supportive. My husband always tells the story. He's an engineer. He went to college at 16 as well, and he failed his first engineering test. He really wanted to be an engineer, and he got, I think, 15, which is, he was an A student, right? And he got scared on his first test. So he went home. He thought, maybe I shouldn't be an engineer. But he went back the next day and he spoke to his teacher, and his teacher was so supportive. He always remembers this. He said, well, you're doing all your homework and you seem to be doing well in class, answering questions. So just go home and study. And when you come back, it'll be okay. And so he went back and he got, I think, 100 the next time. So he didn't have to quit engineering, and he ended up getting his PhD in it years later.
Bunch of smart cookies, huh?
Well, so I did say that to the nurse director. I guess it was right.
So our time is almost up. Is there one little thing that we've talked about that you want to reiterate, or maybe a little nugget that you haven't shared that you would like to talk about? The floor first.
Yes, I would like everybody to know that there are things you can do to help yourself, even though you may have issues with money, with health insurance, with your health. There are always things you can do using the power of your mind. It's natural. It's what we're born with. It's innate. And I believe it was a wonderful creation of God. So you can get in the zone, help yourself to heal. I have another program called Operation Heal. I work with people to overcome the challenges with health. And also, I'd like to announce that on June 13th, I launched my book in Arabic for all those who speak Arabic. And I'm hoping that this goes viral in the Middle East and places where we need to have help with the challenges that we're faced with.
Yeah. Wow. Launching it in Arabic. Was that something that you thought you were going to do, or is that just something that, like, I need to do this?
I was inspired on a trip to Egypt by the tour guide, something that I experienced. I went into this church. It was at the crossroads where they had a synagogue. There was a mosque and a Catholic church. And the tour guide took us into the basement, or the lower level of the church. And I didn't know what was going to be there. And then he announces, see this over here, this little place, this little hole in the ground? Well, that's where baby Jesus slept when they were escaping from Herod, and there the Holy Family lived there for some months. And because my name is Christine, my mother named me that because it means follower of Christ, I just burst out into tears, and I couldn't stop crying. And I swore right then I was going to do that because my tour guide said we could really use this in Egypt.
Wow. Wow. I love that we're ending on that note right there, because that's such an uplifting story. And you never know what's going to impact you, where it's going to impact you.
That's right.
If you're open up to things. So I love that. So where can people find you?
Well, I have two websites, drchristinesilverstein.com. And you can find the story, by the way, the Arabic translation in that website. And then my other website is clinical. It's idealperformance.net. And I also have a YouTube channel, and it's getting very popular. You can look up my Operation Heal program there in Winning Ways for Teens, my playlist, and that's called The Young Navigator.
And your book, Wrestling Through Adversity, is available on Amazon, but also where else can you get it?
Well, it's any place where books are sold, but Amazon is the main feature right now. And also my Arabic book is on Amazon. So that was a challenge, but I'm glad that I was able to do this before the peace treaty over there in the Middle East.
And if you look in the corner, there's a QR code, and it was also up when she was reading her part of her book. You can, if you're watching on your computer and you have your phone, just snap that QR code. It's going to send you right over to Amazon, and you can grab the book over there. So it's a lot easier. So you don't have to type or copy and paste a link. It's just right there.
It also comes in Kindle and audiobook as well.
I think I had the book, but then I also bought the Kindle version so I could have the audio version so I could do the highlights, because I like to do that. I like to feel like I'm supporting the author as well, by buying one of your books.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So guys, I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Dr. Christine, as well as finding her books. And if you're an Arabic reader, hop on over to Amazon and get the Arabic book as well, because you never know. You never know. I love the fact that she shared that story with us about going to Egypt, because it falls right into an interview that I have upcoming that's going to follow your interview now, where I am talking to a woman who's an Egyptologist. So it kind of flows together.
My tour guide was an Egyptologist. I loved him. He brought me right into the temples and told me all about healthcare and mental health care and what they did. They took care of everybody. They never left anybody out, regardless of who the person was. So that's my inspiration. So great. We're leading right into that. And I wrote the introduction to my book on the Nile River when I passed by at Agatha Christie's hotel, where she wrote Death on the Nile. So that if you look at the introduction, that was my inspiration too.
Wow. Now I've got to really dig back into it now that I know all these little tidbits on it. But Dr. Christine, thank you for coming on and for writing your book and for sharing your stories and your mental toughness and teaching another generation how you can be tough mentally and not so tough that you don't allow emotions to come in, because I think that's what a lot of people think, that if you're mentally tough, you have no emotions, whereas you're showing, yes, you can feel the emotions, but we can move past these emotions and work through
That's
them.
right. Well, you use your performance enhancing emotions. That's what will help you, even in a sport. But the revenge, the anger, leave that aside, because there's no place for that in life or in sports.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Christine. Until next time, guys.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.